"Why are you sitting alone when there's birthday cake?" The question was so simple that Antonio Barone, ruler of the vampire world for more than 600 years, had no answer. He sat beneath an old maple tree at the edge of Riverside Park, wearing a black coat that seemed too formal for the warm September afternoon. Families laughed beneath strings of paper decorations. Children chased one another across the grass. Somewhere near the playground, a balloon burst, followed by delighted screams. Yet the bench around Antonio remained empty, as if every stranger who passed could sense the cold hidden beneath his pale skin. Across the lawn, Katherine Sullivan stood beside a picnic table covered with a wrinkled pink cloth. She had turned 8 years old exactly 14 minutes earlier. Her entire party consisted of one grocery store cake, 2 paper cups, a handful of yellow napkins, and her mother's tired smile. Emily Sullivan had apologized 3 times for the missing balloons and twice for the cake being smaller than the picture in the bakery case. Katherine had told her it was perfect every time. She meant it. Her mother had worked a 12-hour night shift at St. Mercy Hospital, then stayed awake to bring her to the park. That mattered more than decorations. The cake was white with uneven blue frosting, and Katherine's name squeezed across the top in crooked letters. There were only 2 candles because the bakery clerk had forgotten the rest. Katherine had laughed and said each one could count for 4 years. Then Emily's phone rang. The sound changed her face immediately. A nurse had called in sick. A child in the emergency wing needed help. Emily knelt beside Katherine, guilt filling her eyes. "I'll only be inside for 20 minutes. Mr. Collins at the security desk can see you from the window. Don't leave this table," Katherine promised. She watched her mother hurry through the hospital's side entrance, still wearing her faded blue scrubs. Then the park seemed much larger. The laughter seemed farther away. Katherine cut herself a narrow slice of cake and sat down. That was when she noticed the stranger beneath the maple tree. He had not looked at the families. He had not looked at the playground. He was staring at the small blue candle left burning on Katherine's cake. His face was white, even in the sunlight, and his silver-grey eyes held the stillness of winter. He looked neither hungry nor tired. He looked forgotten. Katherine studied her slice. There was not much cake. Her mother had skipped lunch to buy it. Still, she picked up a second paper plate and cut the remaining piece in half. Antonio heard her footsteps long before she reached him. He heard her heartbeat too, quick but steady. Human, young, unafraid, he should have left. He had come to the park for secrecy, not conversation. Somewhere inside St. Mercy, records connected to the Barone Foundation were being altered, and Antonio intended to learn why. No human was supposed to notice him, yet Katherine stopped directly in front of the bench and held out the plate. She said, "The blue part tastes better than it looks." Antonio's gaze moved from the cake to her face. She had light brown hair, tied with a cheap yellow ribbon, and blue-grey eyes that watched him without suspicion. "You should return to your family," he said. His voice was quiet, polished, and older than the city around them. "My mom is helping someone in the hospital." Katherine lifted the plate a little higher. "And you're sitting alone. I prefer solitude." She considered this seriously. Maybe, but nobody should sit alone near a birthday cake. For one dangerous second the park disappeared. Antonio saw another table in another century, a little girl with black curls, 8 candles burning in a silver holder. Isabella smiling as she pushed the first slice toward him. His daughter had been gone for 180 years. No one had offered him birthday cake since. Antonio slowly accepted the paper plate. Katherine smiled as though he had given her a gift instead. "I'm Katherine. Antonio, is it your birthday too?" "No, that's okay. Cake doesn't check." Something almost warm moved behind his ribs where his heart had learned to remain silent. He looked down at the frosting. A faint symbol had appeared beneath the blue sugar. Thin as a scratch at first, then brighter, a crown surrounded by thorns. Antonio's fingers tightened around the plate. Across the lawn, Katherine's 2 candles bent toward him though there was no wind. The orange flames turned blue. Every bird in the maple tree stopped singing. Katherine turned toward the table, her smile fading. Antonio rose so quickly, the shadows beneath the bench seemed to rise with him. The ancient mark was impossible. It had belonged to his daughter. It had vanished the night she died. Now it was glowing beneath the birthday cake of an ordinary human child, while somewhere inside the hospital, a locked secret had just begun to wake. The blue flames lasted only 3 seconds. But Antonio Barone had lived long enough to know that 3 seconds could divide one life from another. Katherine stared at the candles until their color returned to ordinary orange. The birds began singing again. A lawnmower started somewhere beyond the hospital parking lot. The world continued as if nothing had happened. Antonio did not. He looked down at the paper plate in his hand. The ancient crown had vanished beneath the frosting, leaving only a streak of blue sugar. Katherine tilted her head. "Did you see that? Was it a trick candle?" "No." His answer came too quickly. Her eyes narrowed with the quiet suspicion of a child who noticed more than adults expected. Before she could ask another question, the hospital door opened and Emily Sullivan hurried across the lawn. Relief softened Katherine's face. She ran to her mother, and Emily wrapped both arms around her. "I am sorry, it took longer than I thought. It was only 23 minutes, Katherine said. Emily smiled tiredly. "You counted." Then Emily noticed Antonio standing near the table. Her expression changed, not fear, caution. "Can I help you?" Antonio set the untouched plate beside the cake. "Your daughter offered me a slice." Emily looked at Katherine. "You talked to a stranger? He looked lonely. That does not make him safe." Katherine glanced back at Antonio. "He said his name is Antonio." Emily gave him a polite but guarded nod. "Thank you for keeping her company." Antonio could hear the protective tension beneath her voice. He respected it. "She kept me company," he said. Emily gathered the paper cups and folded the pink tablecloth with careful hands. Antonio noticed the faded hospital badge clipped to her scrubs, the dark circles beneath her eyes, and the envelope sticking from her purse. Final notice. He looked away before she caught him reading it. Katherine carried the remaining cake in both hands. "Mom, can we stop at Mr. Bell's store?" Emily hesitated. "We should go home. I saved $3. "For what?" "The music box." Emily closed her eyes briefly, as if calculating bus fare, groceries, and every other expense waiting for them, only if it is still there. They walked toward a narrow thrift store 2 blocks from the hospital. Antonio remained beneath the maple tree until they disappeared around the corner. Then he followed from a distance, not because he wanted to frighten them, because the mark on the cake had belonged to Isabella, and because someone inside St. Mercy was altering records connected to his foundation. Coincidence had died for Antonio centuries ago. Bell's second chance shop smelled of old books, cedar, and dust warmed by sunlight. Katherine went directly to a glass case near the register. Inside sat a small wooden music box, dark with age, its lid carved with a crown surrounded by thorns. Antonio stopped outside the window. "The same mark." Emily spoke quietly to the owner. "She has been saving for weeks," Mr. Bell smiled. "Then today it cost $3. Katherine placed 3 wrinkled bills on the counter as if they were treasure. When the box was handed to her, she ran one finger over the carved crown. "It still will not open," Mr. Bell warned. "No key, no music. Maybe it is only decoration." Katherine said, "How do you know?" "It feels like it is waiting." Antonio heard the words through the glass. For the first time that afternoon, something colder than fear moved through him. He remembered Isabella sitting beside a winter fire, turning a small wooden box in her hands. "If I ever disappear, Father, listen for the song." He had searched every chamber after her death. The box had never been found. Katherine and Emily left the shop and boarded a city bus. Antonio did not follow them inside. He watched from the sidewalk until the bus pulled away, then took out his... "Marcus," he said when his chief guard answered. "Find everything you can about Emily and Katherine Sullivan. No contact, no surveillance inside their home. And the hospital? Audit every shipment connected to St. Mercy." Antonio looked through the store window at the empty space in the display case. "Also find out how an object from my daughter's room entered a thrift store in this city." That evening, Katherine placed the music box on the kitchen table of their 1-bedroom apartment. Emily reheating a call from the hospital about missing medication records. Katherine turned the box slowly, searching for a hidden latch. At exactly 11:47, the lid opened by itself. 3 soft notes floated into the room. Across the city, Antonio froze beside the window of Barone Tower. No instrument in the human world had played that melody for 180 years. Then a child's voice whispered through the silence, "Father." Antonio remained motionless beside the window of Barone Tower as the final note faded from his mind. The city stretched beneath him in silver light, 38 floors of glass and steel separating him from the streets below, but the voice had sounded close enough to touch. Father. No one had called him that in 180 years. Behind him, the doors to the council chamber opened. 12 vampires entered in silence, dressed in dark suits and formal gowns, their footsteps nearly soundless against the black marble floor. At the center walked Marcus Vale, Antonio's oldest guard, and the only man in the room who knew why the king had abandoned the afternoon council meeting without explanation. "Your Majesty," Marcus said. Antonio did not turn. The audit. Marcus placed a thin folder on the long table. St. Mercy received 4 shipments from the Barone Foundation during the past 6 months. 2 were medical supplies. The other 2 were listed as pediatric nutritional supplements. But the hospital inventory does not match the shipping records. Who approved them? Victor Hale. At the far end of the chamber, Victor adjusted the silver cuff at his wrist. He was handsome in the polished, careful way of a man who never allowed the world to see him surprised. "Those shipments passed every required inspection," he said. "If St. Mercy misplaced its inventory, that is a human failure, not ours." Antonio finally turned. His pale face revealed nothing, but the temperature in the chamber dropped several degrees. "You speak quickly for a man who was not asked." Victor lowered his head. "I intended only to protect the Foundation's reputation. Reputations do not need protection from facts." No one moved. No one breathed loudly enough to be heard. Antonio walked to the head of the table but did not sit. A proposed decree waited before his chair, written on thick ivory paper. It would allow the Vampire Council to expand surveillance of human hospitals, shelters, and schools. Victor had presented it as a security measure. Antonio now saw something else: access, records, children. "The vote is postponed," Antonio said. Lady Celeste Rowan, one of the oldest council members, lifted her chin. "We have delayed for 3 months. Human institutions grow more careless every year. Then another night will not destroy us. You left this chamber because of a human child," Victor said gently. Marcus looked at him. The others became perfectly still. Antonio's eyes shifted toward Victor. "Choose your next words with care." Victor offered a respectful bow. "There are already whispers. A little girl approached you in a public park. You accepted food from her. Then an old royal symbol appeared." Antonio said nothing. That silence frightened the room more than anger would have. The mark should have been known only to Marcus, yet Victor had heard about it within hours. "Who told you about the symbol?" Antonio asked. Victor paused for less than a second. It was enough. "A member of the City Watch reported unusual flames near St. Mercy. The City Watch reports to Marcus." Antonio glanced at his guard. "Did your men send such a report?" "No, Your Majesty." Victor's expression remained calm, but his right thumb moved over the edge of his silver cuff. Antonio noticed the gesture. "This council is dismissed." Lady Celeste began to object, but Antonio looked at her once. The room emptied within seconds. Victor was the last to leave. At the doorway, kindness from humans has always carried a price. Antonio met his gaze. So has betrayal. The doors closed. Marcus waited until the chamber was sealed. Then he opened a second folder. Emily Sullivan, age 34, registered nurse at St. Mercy. No criminal record, no connection to supernatural groups. Her husband, Daniel Sullivan, died 5 years ago from a highway accident. Katherine is their only child, 8 years old as of today. Antonio's gaze moved to the dark window. Financial condition? Difficult. Emily is behind on rent, but there are no unusual deposits, gifts, or payments. Nothing suggests she was hired to approach you. And the music box. Marcus placed a photograph on the table. The image had been taken from the thrift store's public sales listing. Dark wood, faded brass hinges, a crown surrounded by thorns. Antonio touched the photograph with one finger. Memory opened without mercy. Isabella sat on the floor of a candlelit library, turning the same box in her small hands. She had been 8 when he gave it to her. She had been 23 when she disappeared with it. "It is hers," Antonio said. Marcus stared at the image. "That is impossible." I watched her carve the mark into the lid. Antonio closed his eyes. "Find the store's records. Trace every owner. Do not approach the Sullivan family. There is more." Marcus lowered his voice. "The hospital called Emily tonight about missing medication files. Her employee access code appears on record while she was off duty." Antonio's eyes opened. "Someone is preparing to blame her. That is my conclusion." Outside, clouds passed over the moon, covering the city in shadow. Antonio looked again at the music box. 3 notes. One voice, a warning from a daughter who had been silent for nearly 2 centuries. "Place protection near their building," he ordered. From a distance. No windows, no rooms. Katherine must not know. Marcus bowed. "And Victor Hale?" Antonio's silver-grey eyes darkened. "Let him believe I suspect nothing." Across the city, Katherine sat at the kitchen table while Emily argued quietly with a hospital administrator on the phone. The music box had closed again. No matter how Katherine pressed the lid, it would not move. She leaned closer and whispered, "Who are you calling?" For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the carved crown warmed beneath her fingertips, and from somewhere inside the sealed box came a second voice, softer than before. "Bring him home." By 9 the next morning, Katherine had tried every way she could think of to open the music box again. She pressed the carved crown. She turned it upside down. She whispered Isabella's words back to it. Nothing happened. The box remained closed on the kitchen table, while Emily stood near the window in her nursing uniform, listening to a hospital administrator explain that her employee access code had been used to approve missing medication records. "I was not even in the building that night," Emily said. Her voice stayed calm, but Katherine saw her fingers tighten around the phone. "Check the security logs." A pause followed. Emily's face lost color. Suspended, Katherine looked down at the music box. She understood enough to know that suspended meant no work, and no work meant the red notice in her mother's purse would become harder to solve. 20 minutes later, Emily took Katherine with her to St. Mercy because she refused to leave her alone while she met with hospital management. Rain had begun to fall, thin and cold, turning the sidewalks dark. Inside the hospital lobby, employees moved around Emily with careful eyes. Some offered sympathy, others looked away. Katherine sat near the foundation display case with the music box tucked inside her backpack. A brass plaque beside her read Barontation Children Health Initiative. Below it stood a photograph of Antonio in a black suit. Katherine stared at the picture, then toward the glass entrance. The man from the park stepped inside at that exact moment. He wore the same dark coat, though not a single drop of rain marked his shoulders. 2 hospital executives hurried to greet him. A security guard straightened immediately. Even the noisy lobby seemed to lower its voice. Antonio's eyes found Katherine before anyone introduced him. For 1 second, neither moved. Then Katherine looked back at the plaque. "You are Antonio Barone," he approached. "Yes, the Antonio Barone? There are several. I am probably the one you mean." She studied the executives waiting behind him. "You did not tell me you owned half the hospital. I do not own it. Your name is on everything." "That is not the same thing." "It feels like the same thing." Antonio almost smiled. Almost. Emily emerged from a conference room before he could respond. Her expression hardened when she saw him beside her daughter. "Mr. Barone, Mrs. Sullivan, did you follow us here?" "No. This hospital receives funding from my foundation. I came because records connected to that funding have been altered." Emily glanced toward the executives. "Then perhaps you can explain why my access code appears on files I never opened." Antonio's gaze turned cold. "That is exactly what I intend to learn." One of the executives stepped forward, but Antonio raised one hand. The man stopped speaking. Katherine noticed. She also noticed that Antonio never raised his voice. He did not need to. "Mom," she said, "can I show him the box?" Emily hesitated. Why? Because it called him. Silence fell between them. Antonio's attention sharpened. Emily looked from her daughter to him. It said, "Bring him home." Katherine removed the music box from her backpack. Antonio did not reach for it. His stillness became deeper, almost painful. "Where did you get that?" "Mr. Bell's store." "May I see it?" Katherine held it closer to her chest. "Do you want to buy it back?" "No." "Do you want to take it?" "Not without your permission." She watched him carefully. "Then tell me who it belonged to." Antonio looked toward an empty family consultation room beside the lobby. Some truths deserve privacy. Emily entered first, keeping Katherine beside her. Antonio closed the door but remained several feet away. Katherine placed the box on the table. "You have to tell me one real memory," she said. "Not something rich people put on plaques." Emily gave her a warning look, but Antonio answered. "Her name was Isabella. I gave her the box when she was 8. It was plain then. She carved the crown herself because she said every ordinary object deserved one secret." His voice changed on the final word, softer, farther away. "On her last birthday with me, she blew out her candles and wished that I would learn to smile without being asked." Katherine's suspicion faded. She slid the box toward him. "You miss her. Every day." Antonio placed 2 fingers near the carved crown. Katherine touched the opposite side. The room grew cold. The overhead lights dimmed. Emily stepped closer to her daughter. 3 notes sounded from inside the sealed wood, then the lid opened. There were no gears beneath it, no velvet lining, only a red crystal suspended in darkness. Antonio's face became even paler. Katherine leaned closer. The crystal flashed. For an instant, a young woman appeared in the reflection, her dark hair moving as if caught in invisible wind. She looked directly at Antonio and whispered, "You came too late once, Father. Do not come too late again." The red crystal pulsed once, and the consultation room disappeared. Katherine still felt the carpet beneath her sneakers, but the white walls of St. Mercy were gone. In their place stood a narrow stone corridor lit by rows of candles. Rain struck tall windows. The sound was soft at first, then louder, as if the storm had been waiting 180 years to be heard. A young woman hurried toward a wooden door, holding the same music box against her chest. Her dark hair had come loose around her face. Her eyes were frightened but steady. Katherine knew who she was before Antonio spoke. Isabella. The name left him like a breath he had been holding for centuries. Isabella stopped in the middle of the corridor. At the far end, a man stood beneath an archway. His face remained hidden in shadow. Only his right hand was visible. A silver ring circled one finger, marked with a symbol like grey ash. A thin crack ran through the ring from top to bottom. Isabella looked past him, not toward Antonio, toward Katherine. "He will come for the children next," she whispered. The memory shattered. The hospital room returned in a rush of cold air. The overhead lights dimmed. Every clock on the wall stopped at the same second. Emily pulled Katherine against her side. Antonio remained across the table, staring at the crystal. His face had become almost colorless. The pale skin that seemed unusual in the park now looked impossible beneath the fluorescent light. "Who was that man?" Katherine asked. Antonio did not answer. His eyes shifted from silver grey to something darker. Red moved beneath the surface like embers under ice. His shadow climbed the wall behind him, stretching higher than any human shadow should. For one breath, it formed the shape of wide black wings. Then it folded back into darkness. Emily saw it. Katherine felt her mother's hand tighten around her shoulder. "Antonio," Emily said, each word careful. "What are you?" The crystal gave another slow pulse. A low sound rose from inside the box, not a voice, not music, but something between the two. Antonio reached toward it and stopped before his fingers crossed the edge. "Do not touch the crystal." Katherine looked down. Her hand was still resting near the carved crown. "Why? Because I do not know what Isabella preserved inside it. She showed me a memory." "Yes." His voice was quiet again, but the room still felt cold. "A memory. Not a spirit, not a ghost. She placed a message here for someone to find." Emily moved the box farther from Katherine. The instant her fingers touched the wooden side, the golden light faded. The crystal turned dark. Antonio's eyes slowly returned to silver. Katherine did not look away from him. She remembered the rain that had not touched his coat, the birds that had fallen silent, the candles that had burned blue. She remembered how the hospital executives stopped speaking when he lifted one hand. Was the man in the memory the monster she feared? Antonio looked at the closed box. "I do not know yet, are you?" Emily drew a sharp breath, but Katherine kept watching him. Antonio could have answered with anger. He could have told her that children did not question men like him. Instead, he lowered his gaze. "I have frightened people. That is not what I asked." Silence settled over the room. Antonio's jaw tightened. "No," he said at last, "I was not the monster she feared. But after I failed to save her, I became colder than she would have forgiven." Katherine studied his face. "Then maybe she saved the box because she wanted you to stop." Before he could answer, the door opened. Marcus Vale entered alone, holding a tablet. His eyes moved first to the open music box, then to Antonio. He stopped. The expression on his face changed so quickly that Katherine almost missed it. Recognition, alarm, respect, but he did Barone. Marcus said, choosing the words with visible care. He placed the tablet on the table. Shipping records covered the screen. One line had been marked in red. A delivery had entered St. Mercy the night before under Emily Sullivan's employee code. Its destination was the pediatric research wing. The approving officer was Victor Hale. Emily stepped closer. "That is not my authorization." "We know," Marcus said. A small security image appeared beside the record. Victor stood near a supply cart, adjusting the silver ring on his right hand. Grey ash marked its surface. A thin crack divided it. Katherine pointed at the photograph. "That is him." Antonio's attention snapped toward her. "You are certain? He was in Isabella's memory." The crystal flared inside the box. Every light in the room went out. 1 second later, emergency lamps filled the hallway with red. A hospital alarm began to sound above them. Marcus touched the receiver in his ear. His face hardened. "The pediatric wing has been sealed from the inside. The elevators are not responding." Emily went pale. "There are children up there." Antonio turned toward the ceiling. The quiet stranger from the park seemed to vanish. Something ancient moved behind his eyes. Something powerful enough to make the windows tremble in their frames. Katherine watched him, fear rising beside a question she could no longer ignore. Antonio Barone was not an ordinary man. He was not only wealthy, he was not only dangerous. And whatever truth he had hidden from her was about to step into the light. The emergency lights painted the consultation room red. Somewhere above them, the alarm continued in slow, measured bursts. Antonio looked at Marcus. How many children are in the pediatric wing? 32 patients, 11 family members, and 9 staff members. Stairwells locked electronically. Fire exits sealed by the same system. Emily stepped forward. That should not be possible. The safety controls are isolated from the main network. Marcus glanced at Antonio. Someone installed a second control system inside the building. Katherine looked at the dark music box. Victor? We do not know yet, Antonio said. His voice remained calm, but the air around him had changed. The cold was no longer accidental. It moved with him. He turned toward Emily. You know this hospital better than anyone in this room. Is there another way into the pediatric wing? Emily thought quickly. There is an old service staircase behind the laundry department. It was closed during renovations, but the structure is still there. Take Marcus. I am not leaving Katherine. Then Katherine comes with us until we reach a secure floor. Emily studied him. You expect me to trust you after everything I just saw? Antonio held her gaze. No, I expect you to protect your daughter. At this moment, our goals are the same. A heavy sound echoed through the hallway. The consultation room door locked by itself. Katherine flinched. Antonio moved toward it and placed one pale hand against the metal. The lock clicked open without a key. Emily stared. How did you do that? There is no time. There is enough time for one answer. Antonio looked toward Katherine. She stood beside the table with the music box pressed against her sweater. Her blue-gray eyes were not frightened in the way he expected. They were hurt. You knew something was different about you, she said. Yes. And you let me think you were just a lonely man in the park. For a few minutes I wanted to be. That was not your choice to make for me. The words struck more deeply than any accusation from the council. Antonio lowered his head slightly. You are right. No excuse, no command, just the truth. Marcus opened the door and checked the hallway. Hospital employees moved patients away from the elevators while emergency lights flashed across the walls. Several people saw Antonio and stopped. A physician near the nurse's station went completely still. Then she lowered her eyes. Another man stepped aside and bowed his head. Katherine noticed. So did Emily. Why are they doing that? Katherine asked. Antonio did not answer immediately. Marcus did, because some of them know who he is. Antonio's gaze sharpened, but the secret had already become too large to hold. Katherine tightened her arms around the box. Who are you? The hallway seemed to wait with her. Antonio had faced armies, councils, and centuries of enemies without hesitation, yet the question of an 8-year-old child made him pause. My name is Antonio Barone, he said. That part was true, and the rest? His eyes darkened from silver to deep red, not with anger, with surrender. I am the king of my kind. Emily's face went still. Your kind? Antonio looked toward the emergency lights reflected in the windows. Vampires, the words settled between them. Katherine blinked once, then twice. You are the vampire king? Yes. How old are you? Emily turned sharply toward her. Katherine, what? It is an important question. Antonio almost smiled despite the alarm. 617. Katherine stared at him. You look 35. I have been told that. The brief warmth vanished when Marcus received another message. The air system in the pediatric wing is activated. Unknown particles are spreading through the vents. Antonio's expression changed instantly. Silver compound. Marcus nodded. Most likely. Emily looked between them. What does that mean? It means the system was designed to weaken anyone like us who enters, Marcus said. Then you cannot go up there, Emily replied. Antonio was already walking. The children cannot come down. They reached the laundry corridor 2 floors below the sealed wing. The old service door stood behind stacked carts and a temporary wall panel. Emily found the manual latch. Marcus pulled the panel aside, revealing a narrow concrete stairway rising into darkness. Antonio took one step forward, then stopped. A faint silver dust drifted down from above, glittering in the red emergency light. His hand tightened against the railing. Katherine saw the color leave even his already pale face. It hurts you, she said. Yes. Then do not pretend it does not. She opened the music box. The red crystal gave a weak golden pulse, and the silver dust nearest them fell harmlessly to the floor. Marcus stared. It is shielding her. No, Antonio said quietly. It is responding to her. Katherine stepped toward the stairs. Emily caught her shoulder. You are not going first. I do not have to. Katherine looked at Antonio. But he should not go alone. For 1 second, the ancient king said nothing. Then he removed his black coat and placed it gently around her shoulders. You stay between your mother and Marcus. You touch nothing unless I tell you it is safe. Katherine frowned. That sounds like an order. It is a request. Above them, the lights in the sealed wing went out. A child began crying beyond the stairwell door. Antonio looked upward, and the red in his eyes burned brighter. Then let us bring them home. The service stairwell grew narrower with every floor. Red emergency lights flashed against the concrete walls, then vanished, then returned. Antonio climbed first. Emily stayed behind him with one hand on Katherine's shoulder. Marcus followed last, listening for movement below. The red crystal glowed inside the open music box beneath Antonio's coat, but its golden protection reached only a few feet. Beyond that small circle, silver dust drifted through the air like frost. Antonio slowed at the third landing. By the fourth, one hand remained on the railing longer than it should have. Katherine noticed. "You are getting weaker." "I am still standing." Antonio looked back at her. Even now, she refused to accept an answer that avoided the truth. "Yes," he said. "I am getting weaker." Emily looked toward the final door above them, that opens into the old laundry storage room. The pediatric nurse's station is about 60 feet beyond it. Marcus touched the receiver in his ear. No response from the staff inside. They reached the landing. A new lock had been installed over the old manual release. Thin silver lines ran around its edges. Marcus stepped forward, but Antonio stopped him. "Do not touch it. It is a ward," Marcus said, "designed for our kind." Emily studied the door. "Can it be opened?" "But not without activating the silver." Katherine moved closer. The crystal brightened beneath the coat. The lines around the lock flickered. "It is reacting again," she whispered. "To the door?" Emily asked. Katherine shook her head. She thought about the park, the small cake, and the way Antonio had accepted the plate only after she offered it freely. Maybe it does not listen to objects. Maybe it listens to why someone is doing something. She held the music box toward the lock. Golden light spread across the metal. The silver lines dimmed for 3 seconds. Antonio moved instantly. He reached past the ward, turned the manual release, and pulled the door open before the light returned. Cold air rushed toward them. Beyond the storage room, the pediatric hallway was nearly dark. Battery lamps glowed along the floor. Nurses and parents had gathered children inside patient rooms and pressed damp towels beneath the doors. A young nurse hurried toward Emily. The ventilation system started on its own. "The elevators are locked and the main control panel is not responding. Is anyone hurt?" Emily asked. "The children are frightened but stable." 2 staff members near the research wing became dizzy and were moved into sealed rooms. Antonio looked toward the far end of the hallway. A glass door marked pediatric research remained closed. Silver mist curled beneath it. "That is where the compound is entering," Marcus said. The nurse looked at Antonio, then lowered her head. "My king." Emily turned toward her. The nurse's heartbeat was almost silent. "You are a vampire too?" "Yes," the nurse replied. "3 of us work in this wing. We have protected the patients quietly for years." Antonio looked at Emily. "The employees who bowed downstairs were members of my kind. Most humans here know nothing about us." A speaker above the nurse's station crackled. Victor Hale's voice filled the hallway. "Antonio, I know you are there." Marcus activated the recording function on his phone and placed it near the speaker. Antonio's expression remained still. "Open the doors, bring the crystal to the research wing, and every lock will release." Emily stepped forward. "You used my employee tale," Victor replied, "one that will be corrected when this is over." "You placed children at risk," Antonio said. "I created a controlled situation." "You lost the right to call it controlled the moment you used them as leverage." Victor's voice hardened. "Bring me the box. You will not touch Katherine." A soft laugh came through the speaker. "I do not need to. She will come willingly." Kindness is the easiest weakness to predict. The connection ended. Marcus checked the recording. "I have every word." Antonio turned toward the service door. It slammed shut behind them. Silver light spread across the frame. At the same moment, the ventilation system roared louder. Dust began pouring from the ceiling vents. Antonio caught the wall. Marcus dropped to one knee. The crystal's protective circle shrank until it covered only Katherine and Emily. "It cannot shield everyone," Emily said. Katherine looked at the children watching through the narrow windows of their rooms. Then she noticed a faded maintenance diagram beside the nurse's station. A low vent near the floor connected to the research control room. "The control panel is through there." Emily followed her gaze. "The fans have to stop, the doors have to open, and clean air has to come back. You are not crawling into a ventilation shaft filled with silver dust." Antonio forced himself upright. "Your mother is right." Katherine opened the music box fully. The crystal flashed. The nearby vents fell silent, but only for a few seconds. Emily held a hand near the opening, testing the airflow. Nothing moved. The golden light was already fading. The effect is temporary, Marcus said. Katherine looked at Antonio. Then there is only time for someone small enough to reach the control room. Antonio met her eyes. I will not order you to do this. Good, she said, because it is my choice. Emily knelt beside her daughter, fear and pride fighting across her face. You keep the box open. You stay on the marked path. If the air starts moving again, you come back immediately. Katherine nodded. Antonio removed a small communication device from Marcus and clipped it to the collar of his coat around her shoulders. You will hear us the entire time. Katherine placed one hand on the vent cover. You accepted my cake. That means you do not get to be alone now. The crystal gave one bright golden pulse. The vent cover released. Beyond it waited a narrow passage, a dark control room, and the one task only Katherine could complete. Katherine crawled into the maintenance shaft with the music box held carefully against her chest. The passage was barely 2 feet high, lined with cold metal and thin cables that trembled whenever the hospital alarm sounded. Antonio's coat dragged behind her, but she kept moving. The golden light from the crystal reached only a few inches beyond her hands. Everything outside that circle remained dark. Can you hear me? Emily's voice came through the small device clipped to Katherine's collar. Yes. Tell me what you see. Katherine looked ahead. Dust wires, a blue arrow painted on the wall. Emily exhaled slowly. Follow the blue arrows. They mark the route to the control room. Behind them, the ventilation system tried to restart. A low mechanical hum rolled through the shaft. The crystal flashed and the sound stopped again. The box cannot hold it much longer. Marcus warned through the receiver. Antonio's voice followed, quieter but firmer. Katherine, if the air starts moving, turn back immediately. I know. She reached the first corner and paused. Silver dust covered the passage ahead in a thin, glittering layer. It did not seem dangerous to her, but she remembered Antonio struggling to stand. She opened the music box wider. The crystal warmed beneath her fingers. The dust nearest her lost its shine and settled against the metal. Katherine moved forward, one careful foot at a time. The shaft descended slightly, then opened above a small room filled with computer screens. A removable grate stood beneath her. Through it she saw the control panel Emily had described. She also saw a black jacket hanging over a chair and a paper cup of coffee that was still steaming. Someone had been there only moments earlier. I found the room, Katherine whispered. Is anyone inside? Antonio asked. She listened. No footsteps, no breathing, no. Do not enter until your mother tells you what to do. Emily gave Katherine instructions for releasing the grate. She pressed 2 metal tabs and lowered the panel slowly so it would not fall. Then she climbed down onto the chair beneath it. The control screen displayed 3 red warnings. Pediatric ventilation, electronic lockdown active, external access denied. There are 3 red boxes, Katherine said. Emily guided her toward a row of switches below the screen. Find the one labeled manual safety reset. Katherine scanned the tiny printed words. I found it. Turn it clockwise, then hold the green button for 5 seconds. Katherine turned the switch. The moment she touched the green button, Victor's voice came from a speaker above the control panel. You are more resourceful than I expected. Katherine froze. Do not listen to him, Antonio said through her collar. Victor continued as if he could hear them. The crystal belongs to the royal court, Katherine. Antonio has no right to let a human child carry it. It belonged to Isabella, Katherine replied, and she hid it from you. Silence followed, only 1 second. Still, it told her she was right. Open the research door, Victor said, his voice colder now. Bring the box inside, and I will release the hospital. Katherine looked toward a second door at the far side of the control room. A silver ring had been placed over its handle. The same grey ash symbol marked its surface. He is not here, she whispered. The coffee is a trick. The jacket is a trick. He wants us to think he is close. Marcus answered immediately. Good observation. Continue the reset. Katherine held the green button. 1 second, 2. The screen flickered. 3. The ventilation system roared to life above her, and silver dust began moving through the shaft behind her. Katherine, come back, Emily said. Not yet. 4 seconds. The crystal dimmed. 5. The control screen changed from red to blue. Fresh air circulation restored. Electronic lockdown released. A series of heavy clicks echoed through the hospital. Doors opened along the pediatric hallway. Elevators restarted. The alarm stopped. For the first time in several minutes, the building became quiet. Katherine let go of the button. It worked. Emily's relieved breath came through the receiver. Stay where you are. We are coming to you. The silver ring on the research door suddenly began to glow. The red crystal answered with a golden pulse. An image appeared across the control screen. replacing the hospital system. Isabella stood in the ancient corridor again, but this time she was holding a hospital record marked with the Barone crown. Behind her were rows of names, children's names. The Foundation was never his first target, Isabella said. It was his hiding place. Antonio's voice became very still. Katherine, describe what you see. She read the first 3 names aloud. Marcus interrupted. Those children were treated at different hospitals over the past 20 years. All received grants approved by Victor Hale. Isabella raised one hand in the memory and pointed toward the cracked silver ring. He has been feeding the ash with stolen years. The image vanished. Katherine stared at the dark screen. Victor had not created one trap. He had built a system that reached across years, hospitals and families. Footsteps approached from the hallway outside. Antonio reached the control room first, weakened but standing. Emily followed and pulled Katherine into her arms. Marcus removed the silver ring from the research door using a thick emergency blanket. Beyond the glass, shelves held sealed containers marked with the names Katherine had seen. Antonio looked at them, then at the music box. His expression carried no triumph, only grief. This was never about stealing money, he said. Victor was stealing time. Before anyone could answer, the elevator at the end of the hallway opened. 6 figures in dark formal clothing stepped out. Lady Celeste Rowan stood at their center, her ancient eyes fixed on Katherine and the glowing crystal. By order of the Vampire Council, she announced, the human child and the royal relic will now be placed under our protection. Antonio stepped between them and Katherine. No. Lady Celeste's gaze hardened. She opened a royal memory and disrupted a silver ward. She is no longer merely a witness. Antonio's voice lowered until the entire hallway seemed to listen. She is not a relic, she is not a key, she is a child. Emily stepped in front of Katherine before Lady Celeste could take another step. No one is taking my daughter anywhere. Her voice was not loud, but every person in the hallway heard it. Lady Celeste looked at her with the patience of someone who had watched generations pass like seasons. Mrs. Sullivan, the child has opened a royal memory, weakened a silver ward, and awakened an artifact believed lost for nearly 2 centuries. Under the covenant of hidden blood, she must be secured. She is 8 years old, Emily said. She is also under my protection, Antonio added. He remained between Katherine and the council, though silver dust still clung to his black shirt and every breath required visible effort. Lady Celeste's gaze moved over him. Your protection failed, Isabella. The hallway turned colder. Marcus took one step forward, but Antonio lifted a hand. He did not look away from Celeste. That failure is mine to carry. You will not place it on Katherine. A tall man with white hair studied the open music box. The crystal identified her as a heart-bearer. Katherine looked up. What does that mean? No one answered immediately. Emily's expression hardened. Someone will explain before using another name for my child. Lady Celeste folded her hands. A heart-bearer can open memories sealed by royal blood. Such humans were once protected by the court because they could reveal truths hidden even from kings. Protected, Emily repeated, or imprisoned. Celeste said nothing. That silence answered enough. Katherine pulled Antonio's coat tighter around herself. The white-haired councilman frowned. Child, you do not understand what you carry. It is a music box. It is a royal relic. It was Isabella's, Katherine replied, and she wanted Antonio to find it. Antonio looked at her, but Katherine kept her eyes on the council. She did not ask you. A quiet murmur passed among the 6 figures. Lady Celeste raised her chin. The law gives the king temporary custody of any heart-bearer until the court determines whether the bond is stable. Emily turned toward Antonio. For one terrible second saw fear in her mother's face. Not fear of the council, fear that Antonio might agree. He reached inside his shirt and removed a dark metal seal marked with the Barone crown. Marcus stared at it. Do not. Antonio placed the seal on the nurse's station. I renounce the right. The council went still. Lady Celeste's composure cracked. You cannot discard royal law in a hospital hallway. I am not discarding the law. I am refusing the power it offers me. Without royal custody, the child remains vulnerable. Then protect her without owning her. Antonio's voice carried through the hallway like winter wind beneath a closed door. Katherine Sullivan is not a key. She is not property. She is not a vessel for this court's fear. He glanced at Emily. Her mother decides where she goes. Emily held his gaze, surprised by the choice. Then she picked up the metal seal and placed it back in Antonio's hand. You may protect her, she said, but you do not decide for her. Antonio closed his fingers around the seal. Agreed. Marcus's phone sounded. He checked the screen and the color left his face. The hospital network has been restored. But someone just released documents to every major news station in the city. He handed Antonio the phone. A headline filled the screen, "Link to secret pediatric experiments." Beneath it were photographs of signed orders, financial transfers, and internal messages bearing Antonio's name. Emily read over his shoulder. "These I did not," Antonio said. Lady Celeste took the phone from Marcus. "The signature is yours. It is a copy. The royal encryption code is also yours," said the white-haired councilman. Marcus shook his head. "Only 3 people had access to that code. Antonio, myself, and Victor Hale." Katherine looked toward the research room. Victor made it look like Antonio did everything. Another alert appeared. Then another. Human reporters had gathered outside St. Mercy. Vampire houses were demanding an emergency hearing. The city mayor had ordered the Barone Foundation offices closed pending investigation. Lady Celeste's expression became unreadable. "Until this is resolved, the council will assume control of all royal operations." Antonio did not argue. His attention remained on the documents. Victor had prepared them long before the hospital lockdown. Every forged order, every stolen record, every missing shipment pointed toward the king. Katherine reached into the coat and opened the music box again. "Isabella showed me the ring," she said. "I can tell the council what I saw." Antonio shook his head. "A memory only you witnessed will not defeat evidence the entire city can read." Then we show them the memory. The crystal glowed weakly, but the image did not appear. Lady Celeste watched it closely. "Royal memories cannot be commanded." Katherine remembered Isabella's final words and the faded paper plate still tucked inside her backpack from the park. A gift given freely, a truth waiting for the right reason to be opened. She looked at Antonio. "Then we are asking the wrong way." Outside, camera lights flashed against the hospital windows. Inside, the council turned against its king. Somewhere beyond the building, Victor Hale was already telling the world his version of the truth. Katherine closed the music box and held it against her heart. "Let him talk," she said. "We are going to make Isabella answer." Katherine looked at the dark crystal and understood that Isabella had never responded to commands. Antonio had ordered it to reveal the truth. The council had demanded proof. Victor had tried to force it open with fear. Every attempt had failed. "It does not care who has power," Katherine said. Lady Celeste watched her from across the hospital hallway. "Then what does it require?" Katherine thought of the maple tree, the 2 candles, and the small cake Emily had carried home in its plastic bakery container. Something given without asking for anything back. Antonio's gaze sharpened. "The cake." Emily looked at Katherine. "The rest is still in our refrigerator." Reporters filled the sidewalk outside St. Mercy, making the front entrance impossible to use quietly. Marcus arranged a secure hospital vehicle and drove them to the Sullivan apartment while 2 council representatives followed. Antonio sat beside the rear door, weakened by the silver but alert. Katherine remained between Emily and the music box, still wrapped in his oversized coat. No one spoke during the short ride. Every television screen they passed showed Antonio's photograph beside accusations of secret experiments. By the time they reached the apartment, Victor's story had become the city's truth. Emily unlocked the door and went directly to the refrigerator. The remaining cake sat on the top shelf beneath its clear plastic lid. One side had dried slightly. The blue frosting had faded at the edges. It looked ordinary. That was why Katherine trusted it. She carried it to the kitchen table and placed the music box beside it. Lady Celeste entered with the white-haired councilman and stopped near the doorway. "You believe dessert will establish the innocence of a king?" "No," Katherine said. "I think kindness will." She cut a small piece from the cake and placed it on one of the clean paper plates Emily had brought home from the park. Then she pushed it toward Antonio. "Do not eat it." For the first time that day, confusion crossed his face. "I had not intended to. Just accept it the way you did before." Antonio looked at the small piece of cake. "Why?" "Because the first time I did not know who you were. I was not helping a king. I was helping someone who looked lonely." The room became still. Antonio placed one hand beneath the paper plate. "And now?" Katherine met his eyes. "Now I know who you are, and I still do not want you to be alone." The crystal ignited. Golden light spread across the table, passed through the cake, and climbed the walls in branching lines. The apartment disappeared. In its place stood the ancient corridor from Isabella's memory. This time everyone could see it. Isabella faced them with the music box in her hands. Victor Hale stood behind her, younger in appearance, but wearing the same cracked silver ring. "The ash does not consume blood," Isabella said. "It consumes time freely surrendered by those who do not understand the bargain." The corridor shifted. Hospitals appeared across decades, charities. research grants, consent forms written to hide magical agreements beneath ordinary medical language. Children received treatment, while invisible threads of golden light flowed into containers marked with the Barone crown. Victor had used the Foundation's name as a shield, stealing small fragments of vitality from thousands of patients so gradually that no single case revealed the pattern. The stolen years fed the grey ash in his ring, preserving his youth and strengthening his influence. Antonio watched in silence as his copied seal appeared on every false authorization. Then the memory changed. Isabella stood before her father's throne on the night she disappeared. "You will find my absence," she said to a younger Antonio who could not hear the future message, "and grief will ask you to destroy everything." She pressed the red crystal into the music box. "So I leave you a lock." Antonio's face went still. The golden image of Isabella looked directly at him. "The curse was never punishment, Father. It was protection. Your power will remain bound whenever anger becomes greater than mercy. I could not save myself, but I could stop my death from turning you into the monster Victor needed you to become." Antonio lowered his head. For 180 years his daughter's final magic condemned him for arriving too late. The truth was worse and kinder. She had trusted the man beneath the king, even when he no longer trusted himself. Isabella lifted the cracked ring. "Victor can be exposed only when the gift that opens this memory is given freely. Blood can be forced, loyalty can be purchased, power can be stolen, kindness cannot." The memory released its final image. Victor stood beneath Barone Castle, beside a hidden chamber filled with sealed containers of stolen time. A date and access code appeared across the stone door. Marcus recorded both. Lady Celeste stared at the evidence, her ancient composure gone. "The memory was witnessed by the council," she said. "It is admissible under royal law." The white-haired councilman lowered his head before Antonio. "The emergency transfer of authority is suspended." Antonio did not look relieved, not yet. The children's years remain imprisoned. The crystal darkened, but before the vision vanished completely, Isabella spoke once more. "He knows the truth is open now." Marcus's phone rang. He answered, listened, and turned toward Antonio. "The hidden chamber beneath the castle has been activated." Then every light in the apartment went out and Victor's voice came through the music box. "Bring me the heart-bearer, Antonio, or the stolen years disappear forever." Barone Castle rose above the city like a shadow carved from stone. By the time Antonio's car passed through the iron gates, the rain had returned, thin and cold against the windows. Katherine sat between Emily and the music box, still wearing Antonio's coat. Marcus drove. Lady Celeste and the white-haired councilman followed in a second vehicle. No reporters had tracked them. Marcus had sent an empty royal car toward Barone Tower, while hospital security moved Antonio through a service exit. The deception bought them minutes, nothing more. Antonio had not fully recovered from the silver. His face remained pale even for a vampire, and his hands stayed still only through effort. Katherine noticed every time his breathing changed. "You should rest," she said. "Victor chose this moment because he knows I cannot." "That does not make resting a bad idea." Antonio looked at her. "You sound like your mother," Emily almost smiled, but the castle doors opened before she could answer. Inside, the great hall stood dark. No servants waited, no guards announced the king. Every candle had been extinguished except one at the end of a long corridor. A yellow light, small, lonely. Antonio stopped. That lamp belonged outside Isabella's room. Marcus reached beneath his coat and removed a flashlight. "Victor wants us to follow it. Then we follow carefully." The hidden entrance lay behind the old throne room. Antonio pressed his royal seal into a hollow carved into the wall. Stone shifted with a low sound, revealing stairs descending beneath the castle. Cold air rose from below, carrying the faint scent of ash. Katherine held the music box tighter. The crystal pulsed through the wood. At the bottom waited a circular chamber filled with glass containers. Thousands of them lined the walls, each holding a thread of golden lightly. Others barely shimmered. Names and dates had been written beneath every seal. Children, families, hospitals, decades of stolen time. Emily covered her mouth. "Can it be returned?" Lady Celeste studied the symbols on the floor. "Only the heart-bearer can release it now. The memory bond has passed through her." A voice came from the darkness above them. "At last the council understands." Victor Hale stood on a narrow balcony overlooking the chamber. His silver ring glowed with grey light. He looked exactly as he had in the hospital photograph, calm, polished, untouched by time. "You built this beneath my home," Antonio said. "You gave me the perfect hiding place. Everyone watches a king. No one watches what sleeps beneath his throne." Marcus moved toward the stairs leading to the balcony, but silver symbols ignited across the floor. He stopped. Antonio did not. He took one step, then another, until the curse inside him tightened like an invisible chain. The chamber trembled. Katherine saw anger rise in his eyes, and with it, weakness. Isabella's lock was holding him back. Victor smiled. "You cannot reach me while hatred rules you." "Your daughter made certain of that." Antonio forced his hands open. The crystal opened the vault. "Now she must transfer the stolen years into my ring. If she refuses, I erase the containers one by one." Golden threads flickered along the walls. Katherine looked at the names. She understood the trap. Antonio could not use his full power. Marcus could not cross the silver floor. The council could not touch the memory seals. Victor believed the only person who could move freely was also the easiest to frighten. "I will do it," Katherine said. Emily caught her arm. "No." Katherine looked at her mother. "Trust me." Antonio's voice hardened. "Katherine, you do not owe him obedience. I know." She removed the music box from beneath the coat and walked toward the center of the chamber. The silver symbols did not react to her. Victor descended from the balcony, stopping several feet away. Up close, the crack in his ring was wider than it had appeared in the memory. Grey light leaked through it like smoke. "Open the box," he said. Katherine obeyed. The red crystal rose above the wood. Golden threads inside the containers leaned toward it. Victor extended his hand. "Now direct them into the ring." Katherine stared at the silver band. His expression changed. "What?" "The crack. Isabella showed me. The ring cannot receive anything while the royal memory is open. It was a lie, a small one, a necessary one." Victor looked from her to the crystal. Doubt entered his face. Katherine lowered her voice. "You have to take it off." Antonio understood before anyone else did. He said nothing. Victor hesitated, then pulled the ring from his finger. The moment it left his hand, the grey light vanished, the chamber changed, every container brightened at once. Voices filled the air, not screams. Names, thousands of names spoken softly by the years Victor had stolen. They moved toward him like a tide of memory. Victor stepped back. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Katherine said. "You did." Without the ring protecting him, the memories recognized the man who had taken them. Images surrounded him. Hospital rooms, signed forms, worried parents, children growing tired too soon. But the voices were not sound. They were truth. Marcus crossed the floor as the silver symbols faded and secured the ring inside a sealed cloth. Lady Celeste ordered Victor taken into royal custody. He did not resist. He only stared at Katherine as though he had finally understood the weakness in his plan. Kindness could be predicted, courage could not. Then the chamber shook. A crack of golden light split the floor beneath the containers. Antonio looked upward. "The vault is collapsing." The glass seals began to tilt. Katherine reached for the crystal, but a section of stone fell between her and the others, trapping her beside the central throne that powered the chamber. Antonio saw two paths. The first led to the throne, the source of his ancient strength. The second led to Katherine. He did not hesitate. He turned away from the throne and stepped into the falling light. Antonio stepped into the falling golden light and drove his royal seal into the stone beside the throne. The ancient metal answered with a sound deeper than thunder. Lines of power spread beneath the floor, revealing what Victor had done. He had connected the hidden vault to the oldest source of Antonio's strength, turning the king's own throne into an anchor for the stolen years. Every container depended on it. Every crack in the chamber widened because the ring had been removed from the system holding it together. "He tied the vault to the crown," Lady Celeste said from beyond the fallen stone. "If the throne breaks, the seals may fail." Katherine stood beside the dark seat at the center of the chamber, the open music box glowing in her hands. A broken section of floor separated her from Antonio. Golden threads twisted above her like thousands of fragile stars. "Then do not break it," she called. Antonio looked at the throne. For 6 centuries it had carried the authority of his bloodline. It had strengthened every command, protected the castle, and bound the vampire houses to his rule. Victor had expected Antonio to save it. Kings always save the source of their power. Antonio turned away from it. "Marcus," he said, "get everyone to the upper stairs." Marcus had secured Victor's cracked ring inside a folded length of royal warding cloth, woven with dark thread that contained the silver without touching it. The white-haired councilman took custody of Victor while Lady Celeste helped Emily across the unbroken section of floor. Emily resisted. "I am not leaving, Katherine." "Neither am I," Antonio said. Another tremor crossed the chamber. Stone shifted between him and the child. Katherine crouched instinctively, protecting the music box beneath Antonio's coat. Antonio placed both hands against the floor. His eyes turned red. Power gathered around him, but Isabella's curse tightened immediately. Invisible chains of golden light wrapped around his arms. Anger had brought the lock to life. Victor watched from the stairs with a faint, exhausted smile. "You cannot save her while you hate me." Antonio heard the truth inside the words. He could not reach Katherine through rage. He closed his eyes. He let the fury pass through him without obeying it. He thought of Isabella carving a crown into an ordinary wooden box. He thought of Katherine offering cake to a stranger because no one should sit alone. The chains loosened. "I am not doing this because of you," Antonio told Victor. "I am doing it because of her." The golden restraints vanished. Antonio struck the royal seal again, not against the throne, but against the stone connecting it to the vault. A bright line split the floor. The throne's power flowed out of the chamber and back into the castle walls. The great seat cracked down the center. Antonio staggered as centuries of borrowed strength left him. His face became nearly human in its weariness. The collapsing light slowed, not stopped, slowed. A narrow path opened across the broken floor. Antonio crossed it as the chamber shook around him. He reached Katherine and covered her with his body beneath the shelter of the throne's remaining arch. Dust filled the air. Golden threads flashed overhead. Katherine pressed one hand against his pale cheek. "You are not alone this time." Antonio looked at her, and something inside him finally broke without being destroyed. The red crystal rose from the music box. Isabella appeared in the light between them, no longer surrounded by the ancient corridor. She stood in sunlight. "A king is not the one everyone fears," she said. "He is the one who makes sure no child has to be afraid." Antonio's eyes closed. A tear moved down his face, and he did not hide it. The final thread of Isabella's curse unwound from his heart. Warmth returned to the chamber. Katherine felt it first. The crystal was waiting for her, not for an order, for a choice. "How do I send the years back?" she asked. Isabella looked toward the containers. "Call them home." Katherine placed both hands around the music box. She thought of the names she had seen. Children in hospital rooms, parents signing papers they did not understand, families losing days, months, and years without knowing why. "They do not belong here," Katherine said. "They belong to the people who lived them." The crystal opened like a small sun. Golden threads rose from every container and passed through the ceiling without breaking stone. They traveled beyond the castle, across the city, and toward hospitals and homes throughout the country. The containers emptied one by one. Nothing shattered. Nothing was lost. The stolen years returned as warmth, strength, clearer memories, and time no longer missing from lives. Victor sank onto the stair, staring at the empty vault. His power was gone. His youth remained only what naturally belonged to him, and for the first time, age touched his face. Marcus led him upward into royal custody. The chamber settled. Emily crossed the new path and pulled Katherine into her arms. Antonio remained beside the broken throne, no longer connected to its power. Dawn entered through a crack high in the stone ceiling. A narrow beam reached his face. Everyone froze. Antonio did not burn. He did not weaken. He lifted his head as sunlight touched him for the first time in centuries. Katherine smiled through her tears. "It found you." Antonio looked at the empty throne, then at the child beside him. "No," he said softly, "she did." 3 months after the vault beneath Barone Castle was sealed, the truth no longer belonged only to vampires. Marcus delivered the hospital recording, the altered access logs, the original shipment records, and Victor Hale's hidden financial accounts to city investigators. St. Mercy confirmed that Emily Sullivan had been off-duty when her identification was used. Security footage showed Victor authorizing restricted deliveries. The sealed containers beneath the castle matched names in hospital databases across the country. Human authorities could not explain the magic that had once filled them, but they understood fraud, forged consent forms, stolen identities, and decades of corruption. Victor faced judgment before the Vampire Council and prosecution under human law. He was stripped of every title, account, and privilege he had built through stolen time. He did not escape. He did not disappear. For the first time in centuries, he had nowhere left to hide. Emily's suspension was removed. St. Mercy issued a public apology, restored her position, and offered her leadership of a new patient protection office. She accepted only after demanding independent oversight of every donation, medical study, and foundation grant. Antonio agreed before she finished speaking. The Barone Foundation reopened under a public board that included physicians, parents, financial auditors, and no member of the vampire court with unchecked authority. Families connected to Victor's network received compensation and long-term care. The returned years did not erase illness or make anyone suddenly young. Instead, children who had carried unexplained exhaustion began sleeping peacefully. Patients whose strength had faded without reason slowly improved. Memories became clearer. Recovery became possible again. Time had returned, but life still asked them to use it well. 1 week after the vault was sealed, the Vampire Council gathered in the old throne room. The ancient throne remained cracked and empty. Its power had returned to the castle walls, preserving the protections around the kingdom, but no single seat controlled them anymore. Lady Celeste asked Antonio whether he intended to rebuild it. No, he said, a kingdom should not depend on one man believing he can never be wrong. The council voted, not because ancient law demanded it, not because his bloodline guaranteed it. They chose Antonio again because he had surrendered power when keeping it would have cost a child her life. He remained king, but the laws changed. No human could be claimed, confined, or placed under royal custody without consent and lawful protection. Heart-bearers would no longer be treated as relics. Catherine's name appeared nowhere in public records. She returned to school, complained about math homework, and lived with Emily in a brighter apartment near St. Mercy. Antonio paid nothing without Emily's approval. When he offered to buy them a house, she refused. When he offered Katherine a royal tutor, Katherine asked whether the tutor assigned homework. Antonio admitted that he did. She refused too. The music box remained on a shelf in Katherine's bedroom. Its red crystal had become clear and quiet after Isabella's final memory faded. It no longer opened sealed visions or spoke across centuries. Antonio told Katherine she should keep it. Isabella had trusted the box to someone who understood why kindness mattered. Katherine agreed, but only after Antonio promised to visit without arriving with 6 guards. 9 months later, on Katherine's 9th birthday, the courtyard at St. Mercy was filled with yellow balloons, paper stars, and enough cake for every child in the pediatric wing. Emily lit all 9 candles. Marcus stood near the gate, pretending not to enjoy the music. Lady Celeste sent a silver crown, which Katherine used as a flower pot. Antonio arrived after sunrise. He paused beneath the maple tree where they had first met. Morning light touched his pale face without weakening him. That freedom belonged only to Antonio, the final gift left by Isabella's broken curse. Other vampires still kept to shadow, and he never pretended his miracle had changed their nature. Katherine carried the first slice of cake across the courtyard. Antonio expected her to bring it to him. Instead, she walked past. A newly admitted boy sat alone near the hospital doors, watching the party from a distance. Katherine offered him the plate. He accepted. Only then did she return to Antonio, cut the second slice in half, and hand him 1 piece. Now nobody is sitting alone. Antonio looked at the children, at Emily laughing beneath the balloons, and at the morning sky he had once believed was closed to him forever. For 6 centuries he had thought power kept a kingdom alive. Katherine Sullivan had taught him something greater. A kingdom survived because someone noticed who had been forgotten, crossed the distance between them, and chose to share what little they had. Antonio accepted the cake. Then the Vampire King stepped fully into the sunlight, not as a ruler feared by the darkness, but as a man who had finally learned how to leave it.